Hello there and welcome to the AI department. Today we're going to be talking about Stable Diffusion, the open source AI that helps you create any image you can imagine. Let's get right to it. So here's a nice simple example to get started. We're here at huggingface.co, which is an online platform for sharing AI resources. And here we have a Stable Diffusion instance we can use. I always like to start with Pikachu. So let's type in Pikachu, click generate, and a few moments later, 4 Pikachus. Now, these aren't the best Pikachus, but for not a lot of work, we got some pretty good Pikachus. But let's add a little more to this prompt. I've got kind of a long prompt added to my clipboard here, and I'm going to add him in here and click generate. And after some time, Pikachu in Cyberpunk Japan. But you know, he's looking kind of small in this one, and I honestly don't even see him in this one. So let's punch it up a little bit. If we put some parentheses around Pikachu, we will add more weight to that keyword. So we run it again, and there we go, Pikachu front and center. Now down here in advanced options, they have kind of the first parameter that we have control of, and this is the guidance scale. You might also see it called the CFG scale. This is how close to the prompt is it going to get. So if we make it a little lower, it's going to make it very creative and not really stick to the prompt. And the higher we go, the more it's going to stick to that prompt. I like to stay between about 5 and then maybe go up to like 16. Under here, there's some examples, and it's good to see how they use kind of many words. Really short prompts don't do that well. It needs a little more information. When you click one, it also shows you that it adds a negative prompt, and especially in the 2.1 version, negative prompts are just as important as positive prompts. That about wraps this up. Let's go to a site that's a little more exciting. So this is Lexica, and the first thing that I notice is that, wow, these are some much higher quality images than we were getting over from the last place. I can click in here in one of these, look at this prompt, and I'll tell you that if you were to just copy this prompt and put it back on the last page, you're not going to get an image to the quality of this. And one of the main reasons for this is that this model was generated using the Lexica Aperture V2 model. This model was fine-tuned based off of Stable Diffusion 1.5, and we know this because it's still good at doing celebrities. 1.2, celebrities and a lot of kind of controversial material were taken out by default. One reason for this is that anything that was taken out can be put back in with fine-tuning. So let's compare apples to apples here. Let's click over here to generate and type in our faithful Pikachu. And yeah, what you see here is going to be, from just one word, some really, really high quality Pikachus. So definitely check out Lexica, steal some prompts, use it for inspiration, and see how people are kind of getting these images. But if you really want to get a better understanding of Stable Diffusion, then I suggest you use Automatic 1111. And the best way to access Automatic 1111 is by using the Last Ben's Google Colab. So here we are at the Last Ben GitHub page. Just come down, click on this picture on the left, and you'll open up a fresh Google Colab. So the first thing I'm going to say is you're going to want to create a fresh Google account to use this. There are some security risks, and you don't want to mess around with your personal data. Now, Google Colab is kind of just Google Docs for running Python code. Each one of these little cells has a bit of code, and by hitting this play button, you will run the code. Before we run the code, we're going to want to come up here to File and click Save to our drive. Now we've created an instance on our Google Drive and it's safe to run. I like to rename it, usually with the date. And we can come down here to the first play button. Now this is just going to ask you to connect to your Google Drive, which you should do. And then you click this one, and then you can just keep clicking them. They will run sequentially. And then you come down here to model and download, and this is the first decision you have to make. Now, we were using the 2.1 before, but if this is your first time getting started, I would kind of recommend starting with the 1.5. It's a little easier to get up and running, even though the 2.1 is more powerful. I would also click this Run in Painting model, and then down here we have to enter a token. Now, we were on Hugging Face earlier, and we have to go back there, make sure we have an account set up. Once we have the account set up, we come up here to our picture, and then come down here to Settings, and then pop over here to Access Keys. Now, I already have access keys created, but all you need to do is create one and then also make sure you give it write access. Now that I have that copied, I'm going to come back and stick it here in this token area, and I can hit the play button. And once that's done, come down here, make sure you have the right model selected, and click Start Stable Diffusion. After a little bit, this will run, and you'll be given a URL that you can click, and voila, automatic 1111. So we will just take it from the top left. This is where you select your Stable Diffusion checkpoint, which just is a fancy way of saying model. I'm running the 2.1 model right now, but you can see we can switch to the 1.5. This protogen model is really awesome. And you can download all kinds of stuff from Hugging Face, and this is where you would select it. So now we'll come down here to the tabs, and the first one is text to image. So you can see, just like from the first screen we were on, we have a prompt and we have a negative prompt. When we come down here, you'll see that we have something called sampling method. And we open this, there's a bunch of options, and there are just so many to choose from, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. But really, this Euler A and the DDIM are some two great ones to get started with, and then just play with the other ones, see if you find something you like. Now, to understand sampling steps, we kind of have to take a step back. We have to understand how all this works. If you really want to understand, this is the best video I've found that explains it, and we're just going to look at some screenshots. So Diffusion is essentially a supercharged Photoshop denoising tool. It can understand concepts, and after a few tries, it can get pretty close to what you're asking for. Each one of these tries is called a step. Now, automatic defaults to 20, and it's actually a pretty good number. Now, every step has a fixed time requirement, so the more steps you add, the longer it'll take. If you're trying to iterate really quickly, you can pull it down to between 8 and 12, and you can start to see what it's going to do. Taking it up to 40, 50, 80, that's going to get you a lot of high quality, but there is definitely diminishing returns, and sometimes quality even goes down if you go to really high number of steps. Next, we got height and width, and if you did choose the 1.5 model, I suggest you leave it right here. We can always upscale it at a later date. For batch count and batch size goes up to 8, and it will make 8 images. Batch count goes up to 100, and it'll create you 800 images. The CFG scale we saw before, and it will control how closely it sticks to the prompt. Now, the seed is really important because, like I said before, this just pulls the image out of nothing, and it will pull it straight from white noise. And the seed is basically a number that you give to an algorithm that spits out the same random value every time, the random bit of white noise. Now, interestingly enough, if you keep the seed the same and keep all the settings the same and click generate, it will generate the same image every single time within some standard of variation. And that's really important because right now we have seeds set to -1, and -1 will just give it a random seed every time, and that's why we're always getting new images. But if we found something we like, we can hit this little recycle button, and it gives us the seed that was just used. Now, from this starting point, we can continue to work, tweak the prompt, and get it closer and closer to what we want. So there's some settings below this. The first one is Restore Faces. If you are doing faces, I suggest you click Restore Faces. The next is tiling, and this is an incredibly powerful tool, especially for just one checkbox. When checked, it'll create a perfect repeat pattern. The left side will match up with the right side, and top to bottom, which you can use to create fabric and all kinds of different stuff. High-res fix, honestly, I don't know what it is. You should probably click it. Down here is script, and let's go here and check out the X and Y. So I'll set X to seed, I'll set Y to CFG, give it some seeds, give it some CFG scales, and now I'll leave Draw Legend clicked on and click Generate, and now we see the same seed at a different level of CFG scales, so we can see what that changes in a very direct way. So that about wraps up text to image. Let's pop over to image. So we're here in image to image, and we'll see most everything's the same, except here is an option that I can come in and add an image myself. So basically, when you do image to image, you're giving it an image instead of just white noise. Here's a good example. I found a headshot I really liked. I liked the head tilt. I thought everything was good. I'm going to pop it in here, and I'm going to add some different keywords. Click generate. And now we got kind of a remix of our first image. Down here, most of the controls are the same. The one thing to point out is that now there is a denoising strength. So just like the CFG scale does with a prompt, this does with the original image. If we set the denoising strength low, like let's say 0.2, we're going to get an image that doesn't change very much. If we set it up to 4 or 5, we're going to get an image that is starting to get creative. We set it to 7.5, now we're getting very, very creative. And if we get higher than that, we might as well just use text to image. Image to image has a different set of scripts. I haven't played with them all. I actually hear that this SD upscaler is the best way to upscale images when you want to later make them bigger. Alright guys, we are almost done. There are a lot more tabs left, but these should go pretty quick. So the first one we're going to start with is extras. Extras for the most part is all about upscaling images, but like I said before, the image to image SD upscaler at today's meta is the better way to do it. I actually got some kind of shoddy results with both. I'll make a later video on upscaling. Over here in PNG info, this one's really useful. If you have created an image with Stable Diffusion, you can upload this in here and it will give you all of the criteria you use to create that. This is really helpful if you found something you liked and you wanted to go back in and keep tweaking. So the checkpoint merger, just merge these different checkpoints. It's a whole art in and of itself, and I know we've got some of our best models from mergers. I think Protogen is a product of a merger, and there's tons of stuff to play with, and I know very little about it. So this training tab is a little deceiving because it's actually not the best way to train. The best way to train is over in Dream Booth, and that is a whole nother world that I'm not going to get into now. This type of training is called textual inversion training, and the cool thing about it is that it spits you out these tiny little files that you can kind of mix and match. All you need to do is just throw them in your prompt, and it really supercharges your prompt. Where if you just use a word, it'll affect the prompt, but it's not going to do too much. Where if you add one embedding in here, one word can completely change the image. There's a lot to go over with training, and I'm going to have to save it for a later video. I have the Deform extension installed, and it's how you make some really cool videos, but also out of the scope of this video. The Settings tab obviously has lots of stuff to go over. I'm just going to mention you should come down here into the user interface and make sure you set this Show Image Creation to 1, 2, or 3. That way when you're creating images, it's kind of showing you every step of the way. Obviously, this extensions tab is also a whole nother world. If you want to install some, just come here to Available, Load From. I suggest looking down here for Deform. Dream Booth is also awesome. And, just explore some of these. Check them out. Well, wasn't that fun? Thank you for your attention, my little meat puppets. I'm excited to see what you create. Until next time, this has been the AI Department. Dream well, my friends. Goodbye.